When a new generation of players at a certain position begins to light up the stat sheet and take the league by storm, fans naturally move on from the league's established veterans whether they've regressed or not, which is exactly what's happening with the league's edge rushers. Fans like to see change, and overvalue basic stats like sacks, which causes the superstars of yesterday to be deemed washed up even if they're still dominant. Despite totaling only 6 sacks last year, J.J. Watt was an absolute beast when he was on the field. He might not be as quick as he used to be, but he's learned to make up for that reduced speed with technique. In 2019, Watt was arguably a top 5 pass rusher when he was healthy. Since he only played 8 games, his season totals weren't very impressive, but when grading based on per snap statistics, he was among the best in the league at his position. According to Pro Football Focus's pass rush metrics, Watt was 3rd among edge rushers in pressure percentage, 12th in hurry percentage, and 3rd in QB hit percentage. The reason that Watt's 2019 season caused so many fans to jump to the conclusion that he's washed is because the sack numbers weren't impressive, but I would argue that he was just as good in 2019 as he was in his last 2 full seasons, which were 2018 and 2015. Out of these 3 seasons, Watt had his lowest sack percentage in 2019, but his highest pressure percentage, highest hurry percentage, and 2nd highest hit percentage. In my opinion, the stats say that Watt has shown no signs of regression despite his age, and the low sack total is nothing but a negative outlier. This sudden decrease in sack total does not accurately represent Watt's play last season, and this kind of thing happens to the NFL's best pass rushers all the time. Take former Packers edge rusher Clay Matthews as an example. In 2010, Matthews lit up the stat sheet with 17 sacks, but followed with a disappointing 6 sacks in 2011, then came back in 2012 with another 17-sack season. Other than his sack rate, Clay's per-snap numbers stayed pretty consistent through that 3-year stretch. Of the 3 seasons that you see on the screen right now, Clay was arguably the best when he recorded the least amount of sacks. In 2011, Matthews had his highest pressure rate, highest hurry rate, and highest QB hit rate, but lowest sack rate. The fact that he didn't have a lot of sacks in 2011 wasn't because he fell off, or even that he had a bad season. He was still just as dominant in that season as he was in the one before and the one after, it just didn't show up in the sack column. This even happened earlier in J.J. Watt's career as well. In 2012, JJ recorded an insane 23 sacks, followed with only 11 in 2013, then totaled 21 in 2014. You can see that aside from sack rate, Watt's pass rush numbers actually went up during that 3-year stretch. His pressure rate, hurry rate, and QB hit rate all increased every year between 2012 and 2014. Regardless of sack total and sack rate, Watt was still the most dominant defensive lineman in the league, and he was still a nightmare for opposing offenses whether he was getting a ton of sacks or not. Now, it's one thing to look at stats and jump to conclusions, but the film does not contradict my theories about JJ's sudden decrease in production. Even though he might not be lining up all over the defensive line like he did a few years ago, Watt is still getting to the quarterback all the time. He's still explosive, he's still powerful, and his technique has only gotten better as he's gotten older. JJ has 3 go-to moves that he uses while lined up at left edge. One meant for running the arc around the outside, one for running in a straight line toward the QB, and one counter move to keep the offensive tackles honest. The move he uses to get around the arc is a rip move, but it isn't as simple as just ripping to the quarterback with his inside arm. Take a look at this play from Week 5 against the Falcons. Watch how as Watt closes the gap between himself and Falcons right tackle Caleb McGarry, he puts both of his hands up like he's going to make contact with McGarry's shoulders. This makes McGarry think that Watt's going to punch and bull rush, meaning McGarry has to counterpunch and anchor, which is exactly what he does. When McGarry punches, he's leaning toward Watt and has no leverage, so all Watt has to do is rip and bend toward the quarterback for a sack. This rep was lost as soon as McGarry punched, and that punch never would have happened if Watt didn't put his arms up like he was going to bull rush. That fake bull rush would be meaningless though if Watt couldn't back it up with a real bull rush, which is the next move I want to go over. Take this play from Week 7 against the Colts as an example. Watch how he put his arms up like he's going to punch the same way he did on the last play. Colts right tackle Braden Smith has no way of knowing whether Watt's actually going to punch and bull rush right into the quarterback or rip around the outside. Smith basically had to make a guess, and on this play he happened to guess incorrectly. He decided not to punch at all and just waited for Watt to rip around the edge, which caused him to be overpowered and lose the rep. Now, tackles can still overset to the outside in their kick step and have a good chance at stopping both of these moves, which is where Watt's third and final move comes into play, the counter club swim. Take a look at this play from Week 6 against the Chiefs. Watt is aligned on the left side up against second-team All-Pro right tackle Mitchell Schwartz, who was barely beat at all last season. Notice that Watt looks exactly the same on this play as he did on the other two before he makes contact with Schwartz. As he closes the gap between himself and the tackle, his hands go up like he's about to bull rush, but Schwartz oversets way outside, which opens a giant counter lane for Watt to club with his right, swim with his left, and get into the pocket. Perhaps the best part of this play was Watt's acting to sell the holding call, but it was a holding penalty and Watt won this rep with Schwartz fair and square. Like I said earlier, I think that Watt's sudden decrease in sack total was nothing more than an outlier because the rest of his pass rushing metrics stayed consistent. I am predicting that he bounces back in 2020 and records double-digit sacks. If he does as well as I expect him to, I think he has a pretty decent shot at winning Comeback Player of the Year. The problem is, defensive players almost never win this award. It usually goes to a quarterback, and there are a few solid candidates who could win it over JJ even if he does record double-digit sacks. Only 2 defensive players have won the award since 2000. One was Saints defensive end Joe Johnson in 2000, and the other was Chiefs safety Eric Berry in 2015. Aside from JJ, there are a few players who immediately come to mind when considering possible candidates for the 2020 award. Cam Newton, Ben Roethlisberger, and Matt Stafford all have a good chance at winning, not only because they're coming off injuries, but because they play quarterback. If even one of those teams make the playoffs, it's going to be really hard not to give the award to the quarterback. I don't think Gronkowski wins it because he won it back in 2014, but we can't rule him out either, and Bengals wide receiver AJ Green is another possible candidate, so it's not going to be easy for JJ to beat out all of these guys, and the odds are definitely stacked against him. But I really think he has a bounce back year and lets everyone know that he can still be just as dominant as anyone else in the league at his position. The quarterbacks who I mentioned earlier all probably have a better chance at winning this award than Watt, but I think there's a lot of people who don't expect anything from him next season, which is exactly why he's my pick. He's coming off a season that wasn't impressive on the surface, but one that, in my opinion, showed no signs of regression in terms of pure dominance. JJ was consistently winning his matchups quickly, and he didn't make things easy on opposing offenses. Maybe he's lost a little bit of quickness over the years, but his ability to disguise one pass rush move as another is terrifying for opposing tackles, and he's definitely not done hunting quarterbacks. Thanks so much for watching this week's video. Next week, I'll be looking at 49ers tight end George Kittle and the terms of his crazy new contract, which is crazy not only because it shattered the record for biggest tight end deal in league history, but also because it's still a really team-friendly deal. So be on the lookout for that next week. That's all I've got for now. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.